The inner core. What muscles are involved and why is it important? The inner core is a union of muscles and connective tissue or fascia, creating a canister effect, controlling the pressures within your abdomen, also known as intra-abdominal pressure, and the first step in stabilization of the spine and pelvis during movement. The diaphragm is the top and the pelvic floor is the bottom of the canister. The front and sides of the canister are the transverse abdominis muscle, and the back of the inner core are the multifidi muscle. The diaphragm is your primary breathing muscle, attached to the lower ribs and the spine, and has a mechanical influence on spinal stability. It's important to be able to contract the other inner core muscles while breathing with the diaphragm. The goal is to breathe using the diaphragm to expand the lower ribs in all directions at a depth and rate of respiration that matches your activity level. The pelvic floor attaches to the pelvic bones from the tailbone in the back to the pubic bone in front and from side to side between the sit bones. In addition to joint stability and postural support, the pelvic floor supports the pelvic organs and helps maintain continence. The multifidi are deep muscles along the spine that connect from one vertebrae to another from your sacrum to your head. They are most developed in the low back or lumbar region. The transverse abdominis is the deepest layer of the abdominal muscles, wrapping around the trunk horizontally from front to back between the ribs and pelvis, providing support like a corset. When contracted, it pulls the abdominal inward, a feeling of firmness and flattening and not bulging like a bicep muscle. Your inner core enables you to perform most everyday movements. The key role is keeping the pelvis and spine stable to allow movement of your arms, legs, and trunk without thinking. A motion as simple as pushing open a door, sitting down in a chair, picking up your child, or pouring a cup of coffee, your inner core muscles are working in a subtle way. We use these muscles 20 to 30% of maximum to create a tension in the lower spine, but not a rigidity. Rigidity or too much muscle tone makes the muscle unavailable to contract and relax, decreasing our stability. In normal function, these muscles are programmed to engage automatically, without thought, and simultaneously, together as a team, a fraction of a second before any movement or muscle contraction, all throughout our day. If you contract one part, all the other parts should contract automatically. The inner core needs to work together as a team before limb movement to allow efficient motion and stability at the lumbar and pelvic regions. For many of us, this is not the case. Sometimes these muscles are switched off or inhibited for various reasons, such as pain, surgery in the low back or the abdominal region, pregnancy, periods of prolonged sitting, poor posture, poor body mechanics, or muscle imbalances. Therefore, one component may be overworking due to the inhibition or underworking of another component. They help each other out, especially when one is weak or not being recruited. If the inner core is weakened or a muscle is inhibited, this coordinated automatic action may be altered, increasing pressure on passive structures such as ligaments, bones and joints, discs, capsules, raising risk of injury, joint dysfunction, incontinence, hernias, pelvic organ prolapse, and prevention of healing of the diastasis recti. If your core is not firing automatically, you may notice fatigue, not necessarily because you're weak, but because you're not using your body correctly, therefore needing to expend more energy. Increased difficulty in movement. It may feel more laborious to move your left leg versus your right, or may require more effort. Maybe joint pain after an activity or workout in your low back or your SI joint. Changes in soft tissue integrity. Maybe you have doming in your stomach, or your abdominal is protruding, or you're feeling increased pressure in the pelvic floor or having urinary leakage with activities or exercise. Or maybe you've been training and just not noticing a change. We train our inner core to ensure normal muscle strategy for stabilization of the back and pelvis during daily functional activities. If the core isn't stabilized during motion, then other joints like the neck, shoulders, or hip may tighten or compensate. The body is always searching for stability. This may lead to joint stiffness, decreased range of motion, or joint dysfunction or pain. We also train the inner core to enhance athletic performance. It creates a solid base in your body for movement, so other muscles, the movers, can work more efficiently, creating more power and transfer loads more easily, lifting during activity, work, or sport. You can't shoot a cannon from a canoe. We also train it to prevent injury and to protect our pelvic and abdominal organs or viscera by managing intra-abdominal pressure. When pressures exceed what the abdominal wall and pelvic floor can withstand, it may challenge the integrity of soft tissue, leading to hernia, pelvic organ prolapse, or prevent healing of adastasis recti. Even though these muscles work simultaneously, it's beneficial to learn to engage each one individually to increase awareness of your body, creating a deeper understanding when one may not be pulling its weight. You may be strong and have good form with activity and exercise, but you may not be using your inner core. Once you master each component in isolation, you can progress by teaching the whole inner core system to work together. Once that's mastered, you can successfully begin integrating into daily tasks. Activation should be performed in differing functional positions and levels of difficulty to rewire the movement pattern and anticipatory firing. When mastered, the inner core will fire automatically, providing dynamic spinal stabilization and pressure distribution during routine and athletic activities. Good control, coordination, flexibility, and strength of the deep postural muscles creates balance within the body. Hi, I'm Erin Lindberg with Integrative Therapies and Wellness, and today we're going to talk about the inner core and the awareness of our body in the inner core, how to assess the inner core to know if it's firing effectively and automatically, and also how to re-educate or wake up the inner core before activity, exercise, or in between exercise. So we know that the inner core is a group of muscles that was made to fire automatically as a team prior to any movement in order to stabilize our spine and our pelvis. So since we move all day long, the inner core is pretty important. Therefore, awareness of your body is pretty important. So knowing what your body is currently capable and not what we want our body to do or what our body used to do is also important. So knowing what it feels like when your body's in balance, when that inner core is functioning like it should, automatically and timely. The quality of that movement should be easier with less effort and fairly equal on both sides. Awareness also allows you to listen when your body is telling you when things are out of balance or when things are not firing or activating like they should. Sometimes our inner core is inhibited, turned off, or delayed during certain motions or actions. And when you're aware, you can adjust that activity or exercise or intensity, and you can re-educate your core safely. We need to re-educate that right connection between the nervous system and that muscle again for optimal function and optimal performance during exercise or sport. So we need to let our body awareness guide us during our activity and during exercise. And we know that good alignment or posture and breath are very important for engaging the inner core. And the core is more likely to engage if the body is in neutral position or aligned correctly. So that's where we're going to start. And I have my assistant here because it's so much easier for me to demonstrate on somebody else so I can show you what shouldn't be happening and what should be happening. And it's also good because you'll be able to see on some of the tests how things shouldn't be with someone who doesn't have quite good, strong core stability. So we're going to start out and show you what neutral position is. And you're going to bend your knees up with your feet flat on the floor. Arms going to be by your side, chin slightly tucked so your cervical spine is in alignment with your thoracic, your lumbar, and your pelvis. Ribs, lower ribs, 12th rib should be down against the floor and not thrusted or arched forward. And pelvis should be neutral. So this is your AIS. When you touch here, that should be kind of stacked up, aligned with your ribs, your shoulders, and so forth. So I'm going to have her exaggerate her posture. So I'm going to have you tip your pelvis forward and arch your back. And then I'm going to have you tip your pelvis back and flatten your back against the table. And then just relax to a neutral position. So this is a way to kind of find your neutral position. And in this position, your abdominals should be relaxed. Sometimes people engage their abdominals or they tuck their butt. chronically, and it's very important that the abdominal should be soft, very similar to after you do an exhale, after you've released your air after a deep breath. So those six-pack muscles, those superficial or surface abdominal muscles should be relaxed. If they're chronically tight, they're not available to use. And when they're not available to use, that's less core stability. So make sure also that you're using good breathing techniques, and that's a good three-dimensional expansion of those lower ribs. So the first thing I want you to do is just notice what you're feeling. So are you feeling more pressure through one scapula versus the other? Are one side of your ribs touching the table more than the other? Is your entire low back touching the table? Or is there a slight curve?
Entire back.
So she's saying her whole back is touching. So she has a loss of her lumbar curve. So I want you to notice that. Just imagine you were going to put an imprint in sand. What would that imprint look like based on the way your body is connecting with it? And just having that awareness before you do these activity and after, so you can kind of gauge your change. So after you've gotten into neutral position, now I'm gonna show you how to test to see if your core is activating automatically like it should. And this neutral position can be maintained in lying down, sitting, and standing. So go ahead and put your legs flat. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna assess her extensors and her flexors. So we're gonna start with her flexors. It is possible for you to have a core inhibition on one side through the flexors and on the opposite side through the extensors. So we always check both. The nervous system works diagonally and in kind of a spiral motion, so that is possible for there to be that imbalance on the front here and on the opposite side on the back. So the first thing we're going to do is a single leg raise, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just have her, we're just without any cues, she's just going to lift a leg, and I'm going to watch what happens in her body. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is lift your right leg 6 inches off the table and put it back down. And what did you notice?
It's heavy.
Yes. So if your core isn't firing, your leg may feel heavier to raise. You may also notice that her pelvis tipped to the right and her back arched more on the left. That's an indication to me that her core is not actively firing. So try it again on the left side now. And put it back down. What did you feel on that side?
My back arched.
Okay, was it easier on the left or the right?
On the left.
Yes. So she did have some loss of control on the left, but not nearly as she did on the right. So we know that both sides are vulnerable to injury, possibly through exercise and activity. So what I would start with the more involved side, and for her I would do both sides. If you completely are fine on one side and you're a little bit vulnerable on the other, maybe you just do that particular exercise on that side to correct that inhibition, to get it firing again. So now I'm going to do another test for her extensors, so the back side, by doing a bridge. So I'm going to show you 2 on extensors. So she's going to bridge up, keeping her shoulders, her hip, and her knees in alignment. And in this position, while maintaining this position, I'm going to have her lift her left leg up a little bit further and bring it back down. What did you notice there?
I could feel in the other leg.
Okay, now go ahead and lift the right leg and bring it down. Okay, and go ahead and bring your butt down. So she has less vulnerability through her extensors, but same thing, you're looking for, does the hip dip? So if you lift the right leg and the hip dips to the right, it is saying that you're vulnerable on that side, and that side isn't firing like it should. And also, if you lift a leg and your butt starts to drop, that could also be a sign. Her back could have arched as well, but typically you're looking for that hip dip. Another way to test the extensors is getting on your hands and knees. So in this position, she's going to maintain that same neutral posture. I want her to keep her gaze towards the table, keeping her neck straight. I want her to fill her spine, to fill the space between her scapula. So I don't want her really dipped down, but not arching. I want her knees under her hips and about shoulder width apart. And I want her to maintain that neutral spine, not arched up with the butt tucked under and not severely arched with the pelvis tipped forward. So what she's going to do now, while maintaining a neutral pelvis, not moving her pelvis and not moving her spine, I'm going to have her kick her left leg back behind her without arching her back. If her back starts to arch, she's gone too far. So go ahead and kick this leg back and bring it back down. What did you notice?
It was really heavy.
So again, she said it felt heavy. Also, her pelvis tipped this way when she brought it back. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Keep a neutral spine. Bring this leg back behind you. And bring it back down. What did you notice on that side?
I was leaning to that side.
Yes, so again, she tipped her pelvis in order to raise her leg. So for her, she's got core instability through her flexors and her extensors, but more so through her flexors, through the front of her body, motions through the front of her body. But in her case, I would treat all of it. So she would be a person that I would have go through the whole routine. It's about 10 minutes before exercise or after prolonged sitting or just to start her day so she has safe movement throughout the day. Okay, so now after you assessed, and you should always assess, go through the activity and then reassess to look for change. And the testing kind of carries right over to treatment. A lot of the testing is the same as the treatment. So I'm going to have her go back onto her back, and we're going to start by doing the core activation through the flexors first. And when I talk about core activation, it's using natural breath. The big movers, the big back and the tummy movers, like so those six-pack abs, should be quiet. We don't need those big moving muscles in order to stabilize the spine. So in this case for the flexors, her tummy should be quiet. It should be relaxed up here. She should be engaging down here through the transverse abdominis and the pelvic floor. So we're looking at core stabilization down here, and she should be able to breathe normally. There should be no breath holding or bracing at the upper abdominals. If you are unsure how to activate your pelvic floor and transverse abdominis, in this instance, I'm assuming you already understand that, you may need to take a step back and just focus on pelvic floor activation, transverse activation, and proper breathing mechanics. But this sequence is a good starting point for people who have diastasis, prolapse, maybe a hernia or hernia repair, back pain, joint or back instability, or also who just have a sedentary lifestyle. So we're going to start with a leg raise and a heel tap. And the goal is to hold the contraction for about 60 seconds until that inner core starts to engage. You should feel a connection between the limb and the trunk. You should feel it kick in where it becomes easier. And then after the core kicks in, we're going to go through a range of motion for 10 to 12 reps. So I'm going to have you bend your knees up. So when she does this motion, I want her to engage her inner core now. So I want her to engage through her transverse abdominis and her pelvic floor as she holds the position. So I want you to start by lifting your right leg up to about 90 degrees. Her toes are going to pull towards her, so I want those engaged because that slightly engages the pelvic floor. Now she should be able to hold her leg up here without contracting through her upper abs. Her tummy should be soft, and she should feel the engagement just down here. And she shouldn't really tip. She is tipping a little bit. So I want her to try to maintain this position without moving her spine or her pelvis. And she's going to hold this for about 60 seconds. And after she's held it for 60 seconds, then I'm going to have her bring her leg down and tap and bring it back up 10 to 12 times. So you can go ahead and do that now. And when she starts to move, her abdominal muscles may kick in a little bit more because now she's She's using her movers, but she should still be able to maintain a pretty neutral pelvis and spine. So you're going to hold it for 60 seconds to get that inner core to engage and fire, and then you're going to do 10 to 12 reps through the range of motion. And when you're done, you can just relax your leg back down onto the table. Okay, and relax. Okay, so she's going to do the same thing now on the left side. We won't do it for time purposes, but she's going to hold her leg up, keeping a neutral pelvis, being able to breathe normally, not having a soft tummy, not bracing through those big six-pack muscles, and the toes should be pulled towards you. Okay, so that's the first exercise for the flexors. The next exercise for the flexors, I'm gonna have you lay on your side. You're gonna put a pillow under your head. So I want her to stay in neutral position again. So I'm gonna flatten this down a little bit, okay? So I want you to bring your upper body back a little bit so your spine is in full alignment there. Okay, now she's gonna bend her knees to 90 degrees to the hips, 90 degrees at the knees. Again, toes are gonna be pulled up towards your head. The bottom one can relax. I want her to maintain neutral posture again, ears, shoulders, hip. Back should not be arched, tummy should be soft. She should be breathing normally. What she's gonna do to start is she's gonna bring her top leg up off of the bottom leg, and she's gonna hold. And I want you to notice what happened when you did this. Did your shoulder rotate back to try and stabilize? Did your back have to arch? You want to keep the spine neutral, the belly soft, and breathe normally. Remember, we don't need to use those big abdominal movers muscles, those six-pack muscles, to stabilize that spine. So try and maintain this hold for about 60 seconds. And after you've held it for 60 seconds, we're gonna go through a range of motion for 10 to 12 reps. Okay, so let's say she did 60 seconds. Now she's just going to do like a march where she straightens and back. And when she starts to move, she may feel some engagement in those abdominal muscles. You may feel a little bit of a contraction, but it shouldn't be an over contraction. It shouldn't be a tense bracing. She should be able to go through this range of motion without compromising her posture, without arching her back, keeping the pelvis neutral. And relax. You may feel some burning on top of the hip. That's pretty normal. What did you feel with that?
I felt the burning on top of it.
Okay. All right, then we're gonna move on to the extensors. So I'm gonna have her get onto her hands and knees. So this is just like the test that we did. I call this kind of a donkey kick. Keep your head straight. Fill in the space with your spine between the scapulas. Good. Neutral spine, neutral pelvis. And same thing with this. She's gonna have a soft tummy. So your tummy may feel like it kind of sags down to the table. That's normal. Let it sag without arching your back. If you start to arch your back, you need to make sure you're engaging those transverse abdominis and your pelvic floor a little bit more. So the first thing I'm gonna have her do is I'm gonna have her kick her left leg back behind her without arching her back and without moving her pelvis out of position. So go ahead and kick your left leg back and hold. Now if her back starts to arch, she's kicked it back, she's kicked it up too high and needs to come back down. So I want her to try and maintain a neutral pelvis and a neutral spine, making sure that you're filling the space between your scapulas, that you're breathing normal, and you're holding it for 60 seconds. At that 60-second point, the inner core should start to have fired. And then I'm going to have her go through a range of motion of 10 to 12 reps. So I'm going to have her start that now, where she's just going to bring her hip in, her leg in and back. And she's really turning her pelvis. So you want to keep that pelvis neutral. Bring it back in a little bit further and back. So you should be able to do this without a lot of motion through the pelvis and without arching the back. And relax. So she would repeat it then on the right side, holding it back without arching the back for 60 seconds, and then going through 10 to 12 reps. All right, so the fourth one, she's gonna lay on her side. This is also for the extensors. Again, she's gonna get her spine neutral, so make sure everything is lined up. Okay, open, scoot your butt forward, there we go. So the lower leg is gonna be bent at 90 degrees. The upper leg is gonna stay straight. Same thing with this, shoulder, hip should be lined up without any rotation and without the back arched. Now she's gonna lift the straight leg up. There's gonna be a slight internal rotation where the heel is higher than the toes. And then the heel is gonna come back slightly behind the hip. So the hip is here, the heel should be slightly back. If she arches her back, she's gone too far and needs to bring it forward a little bit. And again, she's gonna hold this for 60 seconds. You should not feel this in your back. It should be coming from the core. Those big back muscles should not be stabilizing. Again, you may feel burning at the top of the hip. That's pretty normal. Abdominal muscles should be soft. The other thing I want her to do through this is making sure she's elongating, like she's moving the hip away from her body and the heel towards the wall. So really lengthening this side. And after she's held it for 60 seconds, now she's gonna hike her hip up towards her head, up and then back towards the wall, lengthening. And up and lengthen. Up, lengthen, up, lengthen, up, lengthen, up, lengthen. All right, so she's gonna do that for 10 to 12 reps as well, and then she'll flip over, hold it in that position for 60 seconds, and do 10 to 12 reps on that side. So remember, leg is up, slightly internally rotated, so the heel is above the toes, heel is above the toes and slightly behind the hip. The back should not arch, belly should be soft, and the motion should be maintained with neutral spine. And then the last exercise is the bridge. So we're gonna go back onto the back, and this one has 3 variations. So if you're more of a beginner and you know you have a lot of core dysfunction, or your core isn't quite activating spontaneously like it should, I would have you do the bridge all as one versus separating from side to side. So in that case, I'm gonna have you go ahead and bridge up. Okay, making sure your butt is up without arching your back, keeping that nice line. I'm gonna take the pillow out here. Keeping the nice line between the shoulders, hip, and knee. Now the motion should be the butt up and out this way, okay? It's not necessarily of arching your back, but there should be an elongation this way as well. Now this is the line you don't want to compromise throughout this. If this is compromised, we know that there's some inactivity. So in her case, I would have her just do both legs. So after she's held it in this position, then I would have her do 10 to 12 dips where she brings her butt down and up, down and up. And most of the activation should also be coming through the glutes, the butt, and the hamstrings. If you're feeling a lot of activation through the TFL in this muscle here, it means you're using too much hip flexors, and you want to make sure you're engaging your core more, the glutes and the hamstrings. Okay, so now I'm gonna have her hold it again. If you're a little bit more advanced, I would have you lift a leg up and just gently rest your heel on the floor, and you would maintain this position for 60 seconds. And then you would do 10 to 12 dips on the left side first. So you dip, up, and then you do the right side. If you're even more advanced than that, you'd bring the leg all the way up like this, keeping the toes flexed. And then you would hold this for 60 seconds. You would do 10 dips in this position. And then you would switch to the other side. You would lift this leg up, hold it for 60 seconds, and then do 10 to 12 dips on this side. All right, so those are the 3 modifications of the bridge. So those are the 5 exercises. It's roughly 2 minutes per exercise, so it should be about 10 to 12 minutes long to start out your day, to get that inner core activated, awake, and firing, so it can be more automatic throughout your day-to-day activities as well as your exercise or sport. And remember, these are all tools in your toolbox to re-educate that inner core. You can use them all together as a warm-up, or you can also just use them to re-educate that vulnerable motion. So when you did the testing and you saw some vulnerability in one area, you can just do the exercise there and retest to see if it's changed. And be consciously aware throughout this whole process and what you're feeling in your body. It's more so about how your body is feeling, so you can carry that over into your day-to-day activities. And not only that, but your body is looking for stability, so it's trying to tighten up where it doesn't need to. And then when that tightens up where you don't need to, your inner core may be switched off, and then you're not using it, making you more prone to injury or dysfunction. And remember, you don't need to use those large moving muscles to stabilize. So that's those 6-pack muscles or the big muscles in your back. They don't need to be used for that core stability. And if they're constantly gripping, so if your butt is gripping and your tummy is gripping all the time, gripping and constant contraction is not strong. So untuck your bottom, let your abs go so that inner core can function and find its neutral. And the core fires best when it's in that neutral position. So try and be in a good posture. And also, we need the full functioning of that diaphragm, so make sure you're breathing normally, not holding your breath. And to rewire a movement pattern, to rewire it from the brain to the muscle for it to become automatic and spontaneous, it needs to be incorporated throughout activity. So once you've done this process, try and incorporate that core engagement when you're doing day-to-day activities like picking up your child or standing over the sink to brush your teeth. You don't have to hold the position throughout your day, but you should engage that core at the start of the exertion or the motion so it becomes more automatic. And the goal is to have that solid feeling of what it's like to have that core firing automatically and engaging timely and reflexively in response to motion. And all motion throughout your day, not just exercise. So go ahead and give that a try. And